And welcome to Tribe Talk, where we take sermon to conversation. Today we have two incredible guests with us here today, Pastor Rod and Nancy. I cannot wait to chat with them about this past Sunday service. But before we get into it, let's take a look at Pastor Sheila, a clip from this past Sunday service.
Think about your own children. Teach them to speak confidently. Don't let the world confuse them by not telling them who God says they are. Don't let the world define their identity. Don't let the world tell them they're not loving because they stand for righteousness. Don't let the world indoctrinate your kids. Don't let the world set the standards for your home. We've got to do it, mamas. We've got to be the Deborahs in this generation that we're going to rise up, and we're not going to let everybody else tell our kids who they are. We're going to tell them who they are, and we're going to tell them who God says they are. They're a child of the Most High God, and they need to know that, and they need to walk in that. Amen? Amen.
And welcome back. Pastor Rod, Nancy, I am beyond excited to have you guys join us today on Tribe Talk. We were blessed to have Pastor Sheila, the mother of the house, share with us on Mother's Day, and I loved her message was making a legacy, and it was so fun where Pastor Keith was, just building her up as the mother of the house, and Pastor Sheila brought an incredible message this past Sunday. And I really appreciated what she talked about as a parent, the but God moment. And, she talked about, hey, social media has such a strong influence, but it's not real. But we struggle with thinking it's real and kind of trying to live up to that ideal. And then all of the things that happen with our kids, the daily life, the good, the bad, and, the difficulties that happen. And I appreciate what Pastor Sheila said about but God moments. All these things happen, but God. And Pastor Keith talks about everything before but doesn't matter. So, that was a huge thing for me. It was the but God moment. And I'd love to hear from you, kind of your takeaway about but God moments. Have you experienced a but God moment in your life? Pastor Rod, we'll start with you.
Yeah, we've experienced many but God moments throughout our life and our marriage. Our kids are adults. Our son is just turned 32, and our daughter's getting ready to turn 31. And so we were always told that we would parent until they were 18, and I think it got harder after they became 18, because we wanted to just continue to raise them, and they're great kids, but we have had many of those but God moments, in our family. I think what Pastor Sheila talked about that made the most impact for me was the social media portion. We live in such the digital age that you get to see everybody's highlights, their high reels, that are coming through there, and it's easy to kind of start looking at all of what everybody else is doing and thinking, wow, I don't measure up. I don't do the things that everybody else does, but where we get into the but God moments, they've happened for us personally, where we knew that this wasn't going to happen except for with God, but God. I go back to probably my very first but God moment was, it was my 20th year. I was getting ready to turn 21, and I discovered a tumor on my neck. And at that time, music was my entire life. And all the doctors could tell me is that we're going to cut through. You're going to cut through your vocal cords. We're going to cut through everything. You'll never be able to speak again. You won't even be able to sing again. And I remember at that moment thinking, okay, this is my whole life, and went into surgery, come out of surgery, and literally but God. To be able to continue to speak and to preach and to sing and to do all those things. So those are just little, things along the way that we've had. Any thoughts for you with but God moments for the kids?
For the kids, our son's been through a difficult season, and there's been times where he's just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then the money will come in for the down payment on an apartment or just things like that, but God's. But one of our biggest but God was coming here, landing in Elevate. Yes, we're going to move, the house selling so fast, getting here and finding a rental house within less than a week. And she chose us over everybody else. And she said, I had people offering me cash. And we're like, but God, because the promise that I had when we left was that God would restore what the enemy was trying to destroy. And so getting that house was a but God moment, and then meeting them at the very end and seeing that they were in ministry, and they had home churches and had been on the mission field. That was a but God. We knew that God had placed us together to be in that place so that we could have a place to land starting our journey here. And then obviously his but God moment, putting him in alignment with being able to be on staff here. Those literally are but Gods, because you could not steer it. There's no way you could steer it.
Wow. And that's absolutely unbelievable. And, Pastor Rod, I love how you talk about, here was a surgery, tumor that normal people would probably just say, give up.
Yeah.
And here you are, you know what, we'll do this, but God.
Right.
And you do these things. And Nancy, what an incredible story of making a move to a place, a new city, and the housing market is absolutely crazy, and yet the lady chose you guys over other people that were offering cash, probably more money. And then all you can say throughout the difficulty, throughout getting over that, seemingly incredible hurdle, is but God. Yeah. And all these things line up. And I love how you say God steered it. God made it happen. That was so good. So good. Now, the other thing that Pastor Sheila brought up was she talked about in Judges. She was talking about Deborah, who was one of the judges and the only female judge. And so she talked about there were 3 traits of Deborah. And I love these 3 traits. These are pretty powerful. The first trait she talked about was listen closely to the voice of God. The second one was speak confidently. And then the third one was lead bravely. And Pastor Sheila shared some wonderful examples. Listen closely, included being a doer of the word. Get your own revelation. I thought that was powerful. Speak confidently. She talked about speaking life into others. Don't let the world define you. All my notes that I was just typing furiously as she was speaking.
It was so good.
And then, she talked about leading bravely, where Deborah brought an army together. And, she was fighting for anything that threatens anything that you love. And I just, that was so powerful, where, she brings up these 3 traits of Deborah. So I wanted to ask you guys, what was your takeaway on these 3 traits of listening closely, speaking confidently, and leading bravely? What takeaways did y'all have from that one?
Yeah, so in our years of ministry, we've been in ministry, almost 35 years total. And the number one question, if we had to boil it down, the number one question people will ask me throughout our entire ministry was, how do you know the voice of God? Right, so here's what Pastor Sheila's talking about, that Deborah listened closely to the voice of God, and I caught myself Sunday sitting there replaying that question that people have asked us. And how I've always answered it, when my dad was alive, he would pick up the phone and he would call me. And I would answer the phone and I would say, hi, Dad, or hi, Pop, whatever we were talking at that time. And how I explain it to people about how do you know the voice of God? Because my dad and I talked all the time. I knew what his voice sounded like.
Before caller ID.
Before caller ID, right?
Before it came up on the phone.
So he would answer, I would answer the phone and say, hello, and he would go, hey, son, how are you? I knew exactly who it was, but it was because I had relationship with him. Yeah. So many times we say, I don't know, how can I listen to the voice of God like Deborah does? What's your relationship with God? Are you talking to him? Are you conversing with him? Are you letting him talk to you? And so that's what stood out to me because so many times, like in Deborah's whole story, Pastor Sheila used the verse from Proverbs about trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your path. Well, we have to have that relationship with God to hear his voice and to know his voice. Deborah didn't just wake up one day and go, oh, I'm going to listen to the voice of God today. She had to have some type of relationship with him to do that. So before she could lead bravely, before she could do any of the other things, the relationship had to be there. And I think sometimes we want to jump to the but God moments, but we have to have the consistency day to day of having the talks with God and getting to know him.
Oh, and I think that is so powerful, where it's a relationship and knowing. Because when you pick up a phone, and Nancy, I like how you said before caller ID, you didn't know who was calling you. We do this. This is the rotary phone. But when you pick up a phone, not knowing that on the caller ID whose voice that is going to be on the other end, and in the moment that they speak, you recognize it. And it's because, like you said, Pastor Rod, you're in that relationship with them, and you recognize the voice and you anticipate it, because you spent that time, you've invested that time in that relationship to build on it. Nancy, I'd love to hear your kind of takeaway on those three traits: listen closely, speak confidently, and lead bravely.
Listen closely. It's an intimacy. It is leaning into knowing his heart from his word. I mean, people struggle. Like, I'm in Lamentations, and it's like, sometimes it's just like, why am I reading this? But then you see God's attributes. You see who he is. You see his love. You see him as a father. And so you lean into that. And so in situations, because you're intimate with his word, you can hear him. And very much like what Rod had said, you just know in your heart of hearts, because you have that connection with what he's spoken to us. Pastor Keith talks about it being a template. God's template for us in our relationship with him. And in that, when I'm talking with friends or talking with family, and I just know that God is speaking, I can speak confidently to something, or have that discernment that God is like, something's not right, because of that connection to him leading me. And through prayer and through reading his word, that's how I can speak confidently and lead my family, where I get up early and I do my devotions so that I can continue to listen for my family and pray for my family and have that relationship with God that I need to get through my day.
Gary, we, and I'll just kind of brag on Nancy a little bit. So our entire marriage, she has, since the kids have been born, she has gotten up very early in the morning. And she studied Mary Kay years ago, who said that you all have the same 24 hours in a day. You just have to make the most of it. And so she had made a determination that that was going to be her time. I'm going to get up before everybody else does. I'm going to pray. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to do my devotions and all that kind of stuff. And we all kind of give her a hard time about, being up so early every day. But to the point that Pastor Sheila was making, the relationship that Nancy has with God, to speak confidently with people. I have seen her over the years of our ministry minister to other women, other people, and to speak a bold word to them. And it's because of what her dedication and her devotion is. And I think sometimes we miss that. We want all this, but we don't want the price that we have to pay. Pastor Keith talks about paying your price. And sometimes, what's the shirt that we all wear? Choose your hard. We have to make the determination. That's not just a physical journey, that's a spiritual journey too. When are you going to take the time to really do that? And, if we relate this back to Pastor Sheila's message with Deborah, again, it's the things that you don't see. It's the things that aren't on social media. It's the things that nobody else knows that you do consistently. And I think that that's the key, is the consistency. If you want to hear the voice of God and you want to speak confidently and you want to lead bravely, there's a consistency that has to happen in your day-to-day.
Yeah, you can't jump from A to Z. You got to get through all of that work. There's a process in it. Nancy, I love how you talked about getting into the Bible, getting into the Word, so that you can speak confidently, so that you can build that relationship with God, so you can hear His Word. Pastor Rod, Nancy, thank you so much. It has been such an honor to have this conversation with you on Tribe Talk. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today on Tribe Talk. Make sure you follow us on social media. We're on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Make sure you grab a neighbor, share with a family, friend, anyone. Let's talk about these past Sunday service. Pastor Sheila really brought a powerful word on making a legacy. Thank you both so much for joining us today. We will see you on the next episode. God bless.